In May 1937, a new ship slid into the water at Hamburg. Adolf Hitler himself stood on the dock to watch her launch. She was named after a man murdered just 1 year earlier. Wilhelm Gustloff had led the Nazi Party's branch in Switzerland. His assassination made him a martyr and now a namesake. The ship, built in his honor, was meant for ordinary German workers. She belonged to a program called Strength Through Joy. Factory workers who had never traveled now sailed her decks for free. She carried a swimming pool, a grand hall, and hundreds of cabins. For 2 years she cruised calm waters as a floating reward. Then, in 1939, the war began, and everything changed. The Wilhelm Gustloff became a hospital ship for wounded sailors. Later, she was repurposed again as a floating barracks. She sat moored in the port of Gotenhafen for years. Inside her hull, young submarine crews trained for undersea warfare. By late 1944, the war had turned catastrophically against Germany. Soviet forces broke through German lines in East Prussia. Reports of brutal reprisals spread terror through the region. Hundreds of thousands of civilians fled westward in freezing weather. Families walked for days through snow, pulling carts loaded with belongings. Frostbite and exhaustion claimed lives before any soldier did. Refugees converged on Baltic ports, desperate for any ship heading west. Gotenhafen's harbor filled with crowds standing in bitter cold. Among the ships docked there was the aging Wilhelm Gustloff. On January 21st, 1945, a massive evacuation began. It was codenamed Operation Hannibal, one of history's largest sea rescues. The Wilhelm Gustloff was ordered back into active service. Her engines, silent for years, were started once again. Crews scrambled to prepare a ship never meant for this many people. She was designed to carry fewer than 1,500 passengers. On January 30th, boarding began at dawn in Gotenhafen's harbor. Soldiers, wounded men, women, and children pushed toward the gangways. Small boats packed with refugees surrounded the ship, begging to be let aboard. Mothers lifted infants over railings into the arms of strangers. Officers, moved by desperation, kept letting more passengers climb aboard. By midday, the ship held far more people than anyone could count. Estimates would later range from 6,000 to over 10,000 souls. Life jackets were distributed, but lifeboats were dangerously insufficient. Years of wartime use had stripped some boats away entirely. Command disputes delayed her departure by several critical hours. She finally cast off from Gotenhafen in the early afternoon. Only 2 small torpedo boats were assigned to escort her. One broke down almost immediately and turned back to port. The Wilhelm Gustloff continued on, escorted by just a single vessel. Her captain faced an impossible choice about which route to take. Shallow coastal waters risked drifting mines from earlier in the war. Deeper open water risked exposure to enemy submarines patrolling nearby. He chose the deep water route, believing speed would protect them. To warn any German minesweepers, the ship's running lights were switched on. In the darkness and snow, she now glowed clearly across the water. Meanwhile, a Soviet submarine called S-13 waited somewhere in the Baltic. Her commander, Alexander Marinesko, had already survived days of danger. He had left Finland's coast weeks earlier, hunting for exactly this. Snow flurries swept across the dark water as night fell. Chunks of ice bobbed alongside the ship's hull in the cold current. Passengers crowded below deck, packed into hallways and stairwells. Even the ship's drained swimming pool now held desperate refugees. Just after 9 in the evening, a lookout on S-13 spotted lights. Marinesco brought his submarine into position, unseen in the dark. He gave the order, and 4 torpedoes launched toward the ship. One torpedo malfunctioned and remained stuck inside its tube. The other 3 raced silently through the freezing water. At 9:16, the first torpedo struck the ship's bow. A second explosion tore through crew quarters near the front. Moments later, a third torpedo hit deep beneath the swimming pool. The impact killed many refugees sheltering in that exact space. Alarms rang out, but chaos spread faster than any order could. Watertight doors, meant to save the ship, sealed people inside. The vessel began listing hard to one side within minutes. Passengers scrambled through tilting corridors toward the open deck. Some lifeboats froze solid to their davits and would not release. Others capsized instantly, spilling people into the icy Baltic Sea. Panic swept the decks as the ship tilted further with each passing minute. Families were separated in the crush toward the lifeboats. Temperatures in the water hovered just above freezing that night. Anyone submerged for more than minutes faced almost certain death. Nearby vessels, alerted by radio, raced toward the sinking ship. Small boats and larger warships began pulling survivors from the water. Bodies in life jackets floated motionless across the debris field. Rescue crews worked under constant fear of a second attack. One escort vessel narrowly avoided torpedoes fired from the dark. Rescue efforts continued for hours, despite the ongoing danger. By around 10 o'clock, the Wilhelm Gustloff rolled onto her side. Her stern rose briefly before she slid beneath the surface entirely. The sinking had taken less than an hour from first impact. Survivors clung to debris, wreckage, and each other in the dark. Some children were pulled from the water, already lifeless. Rescue ships eventually gathered roughly 1,200 survivors that night. Thousands more had vanished into the freezing Baltic waters. Final estimates placed the death toll near 9,000 people. Nearly half of those lost were believed to be children. It remains the deadliest single shipwreck in maritime history. The toll far exceeded both the Titanic and the Lusitania combined. Yet almost no one outside Germany heard about it at the time. The war's final chaos buried the story beneath larger headlines. Nazi propaganda avoided publicizing a disaster of this scale. After the war, the story remained largely unspoken for decades. East Germany's post-war government suppressed tales of German civilian suffering. Soviet authorities also stayed silent about the submarine's role. Captain Marinesco returned home, expecting recognition for his success. Instead, Soviet officials treated his mission with quiet indifference. His unconventional past made him an uncomfortable hero for the state. He would not be formally honored until decades after his death. Survivors carried the memory of that night in private silence. Many never spoke publicly about what they witnessed in the water. Some had lost entire families in a single freezing hour. The wreck itself settled onto the seabed of the Baltic. It remains there today, marked as a protected war grave. Divers who have visited describe an eerie, undisturbed silence. Rows of corridors and stairwells sit frozen in dark water. For decades, few history books outside Germany mentioned her name. Slowly, historians and authors began uncovering her forgotten story. The tragedy raised difficult questions about wartime memory and silence. Civilian suffering during the war rarely fit clean historical narratives. The Wilhelm Gustloff story resisted easy categories of victim and aggressor. She had once carried Hitler's guests on joyful summer cruises. She ended her life carrying refugees fleeing his collapsing empire. Both truths belong to the same ship, the same steel hull. Today, her story stands as a quiet warning about war's final days. Even a war's ending can produce its greatest human catastrophe. The Wilhelm Gustloff remains to this day the deadliest shipwreck ever recorded.